records would suggest, this is more than likely a fight on your local promotion's prelim undercard of a banger. We have 1-1 with a no contest Mike Jackson taking on dead game Pete Rodriguez, who's 4-1. And if you do look at this matchup, you might go, well, guys, like Pete Rodriguez, he's 4-1. Like, he must be an absolute banger. Oh, he is, and he unfortunately took on a very, very good fighter in a short notice UFC debut when he took on Australia's Jack Della Maddalena, and in that matchup, he could not figure out the jab, and it was double up, triple up from Della Maddalena until Pete Rodriguez's nose was melted like a stick of butter. He got dropped over, and that was pretty much the end of that contest. So for Pete Rodriguez, looking to pick up the pieces, you gotta kind of look at where the grass is greener. You gotta watch those fights that he had with Icon and the various other promotions of his amateur career, because for Rodriguez, 7-2 as an amateur, and if you go down through it, he had contests at light heavyweight and middleweight. This guy's a small welterweight. Isn't that insane that he fought at some of those lower weight classes?
It's like hearing that Alexander Volkanovski used to weigh at 218 pounds. I don't know if you know the stat or not, Craig, but it is kind of wild because you're right. You don't look at Pete Rodriguez and think, wow, this is a guy who did compete multiple weight classes above the one that he's in right now, because he does fit into the welterweight division quite comfortably. I don't really think he would fight a light heavyweight, you know?
No, to me, he almost looks like a lightweight, and that was kind of the commentary's reasoning in his fight with Jack Della. Maybe this is going to be a guy that drops down, and ultimately Rodriguez gets a shot against Mike Jackson. We talked about Mike Jackson quite a bit on this channel. He's also an MMA media member. You know him from The Truth, and he takes pictures at a lot of different events,
very nice.
the LFAs and so on and so forth. But his UFC career is his MMA career, and that's kind of the craziest part about it. You look at his last fight, he took on Dean Barry. It was ruled a disqualification loss to Dean Barry. First, a little cup check. Referee Chris Tione. Okay, watch the cup check. Second time, spin kick to the nuts, cup check. And then we ultimately get a stoppage. Hard warning. Third one, eye rake, fingers go in. And Daniel Cormier wasn't happy about it, and I'll play the soundbite on that one right here.
Or it's going to go down as a no contest.
There's no chance the official calls this a disqualification.
Right, you don't think?
There's no chance. These guys, they would never do that.
But if you do focus in on it, for Mike Jackson, picks up his first win, and you might go, well, guys, doesn't he have another win? Wasn't he featured on UFC 225? Didn't I pay my hard-earned money to see him fight Chick Magnet Punk?
He did.
You're fucking right, you did. And in that fight, I've never seen a guy more unenthused to be in top position, landing ground and pound, than Mike Jackson, who was like looking away listly, like he was looking away into the crowd, just kind of punching
Do you
away.
really compare that fight to? And feel free to disagree. I look at that fight a lot like Alexander Volkov versus Greg Hardy. Remember how bad of a fight that was? But it was just one of those fights where you could tell that one guy was much better than the other one. So why put yourself in any position to take any big risks? That's the way I always looked at that fight. Because CM Punk, let's just be honest, is not an MMA fighter. Perfect. We get that out of the way.
Heck of an MMA commentator.
And I don't know if you've ever seen this guy in the WWE, but boy, was he a good wrestler at one point. For Mike Jackson, it's very difficult to break down any of his fights like we do break down most of the UFC fighters' fights, because there is a clear path for how most people get into this organization. I know there's some weird people whose Tapology records don't always match up, but for the most part, there is a way to get into the organization. You do really well in the regional scene, you get featured on, some kind of a Fight Pass show, or a show that is then on Fight Pass. The UFC sees you, and then you get signed. Mike Jackson became a professional MMA fighter so he could fight, well, okay, Mickey Gall, to be fair, he fought Mickey Gall, just so then the winner could go on and fight CM Punk. I don't necessarily look at Mike Jackson, his whole transition into MMA, or his progression throughout MMA, and think, wow, we're definitely going to see a much different product this time around than we ever have seen in the past. And it's weird to say this, but good on him for at least getting a UFC win his last time out there. I know it wasn't, as legitimate as many other UFC wins come by, but at least he does have that green mark on his record for a guy that I never thought would be able to get one at this level.
Dean Barry was a minus 1,125 favorite in that matchup, and it was absolutely insane that it did end by disqualification. So you go down through it, you look at Mike Jackson, you've seen Crew Bob Perez in his corner for all of his fights out of Main Street boxing and Muay Thai, and for Jackson, they'll touch on it, he's a Houston Golden Gloves champ. You look at the way that he does fight, he will throw the occasional kick, but then there's a big reset behind it. But it is when he's flowing with his boxing combinations. He's the type of fighter that does hold his hands quite low, but not like the Julian Erosa that I tend to reference a lot on this channel. They're low, and then he throws from odd angles, but he will kind of get backed up, and that is the trouble. With Jackson, Bobby Green's kind of the guy that exemplifies the shoulder roll defense, but Mike Jackson will shoulder roll, drop his hands, and bring his head back at the same time, and he gets countered by a lot of right hooks when he's fighting these welterweights. And again, Mickey Gall, Chick Magnet Punk, Dean Barry. It is something that he's been hit by in these fights. If you look at it for Jackson, though, it is his best path to his skill set, is his boxing. So when you match him up against a guy like Pete Rodriguez, Pete, dead game. I don't know if I love the nickname. Not so much. I mean, the truth is probably better than dead game.
I think so.
But for Rodriguez, he was knocking guys dead on the regional scene, and that's what you love. And what I do like out of Pete Rodriguez is he's not really the biggest kicker in the world either, but his hands are very quick. He throws a lot of uppercuts, which you don't see all the time, especially from the lead arm because he's a southpaw. He'll feint the left uppercut and then throw the right. Like, it really does kind of flip up his opponents. He'll run in, throw flying knees. He is a very wild striker, but good boxing combinations, good power at the end of his shots. But overall, when you do look at a matchup like this, I mean, talking about Mike Jackson, his opponent was a minus 1,125 favorite. Barry was winning just about every moment of that fight until he started to throw some illegal shots, and then he was ultimately cut from the promotion. For Jackson, though, similar skill set from when he came into the UFC in 2016 to what we saw earlier on this year. And this is just the first time he's ever had two fights in the same year.
And the thing about Jackson is, both these guys do excel with their boxing, and I do expect them to use that in this fight. But the thing is, Pete Rodriguez has incredible power and 4-ounce gloves. If you don't have perfect defense, one of those shots is going to catch you at a certain point. And the fact that he is so much younger, and this is what Pete Rodriguez does. He came in to fight Jack Della Maddalena, one of the best, I think one of the best prospects in this welterweight division. I don't think that's a hot take at all. It's like Ian Gary, Maddalena, and if you still want to consider Shavkat, I guess go right ahead. But there's not a lot of prospects at that level in this division right now, and the fact that Pete Rodriguez lost to him doesn't mean that you can completely write him off. I really do feel like this is too much of a step down in competition after, and maybe this is just a good way to get Pete Rodriguez back on the horse, but I just don't know why you have to do Mike Jackson so dirty in this matchup.
Well, for Rodriguez, 8 days notice when he took on Jack Della, and if you're trying to find Pete Rodriguez tape, you might have to look it up as Pete Rodriguez or as Pedro Rodriguez for those astute watchers and listeners that are trying to find tape on their own, as you should. For Mike Jackson, if you want to go see that CM Punk fight where it's billed as a no contest because he decided to puff a left-handed cigarette before the fight, go for it, fill your boots. You look at the odds for this matchup, Matt. Rodriguez opened a minus 400 favorite, minus 677 right now on best fight odds. For Mike Jackson, open plus 300, plus 472 as it stands. The real question in this one, is Rodriguez going to be able to close the gap? Is he going to be able to also mix it to the body? Because he loves to throw the hook to the body, lead right hook to the body. He'll throw a jab there as well to mix it up a little bit. And a lot of his fights go very, very quick. If you focus on it for Rodriguez, the 4-1 and the 4-1-1 on that record is he beat guys as a pro that were 2-2, 0-1, and 5-1, and that was Roberto Pixley, and he beat a guy who was 1-0. But Pixley was 5-1. All 5 of Pixley's wins were over debuting fighters, so not really the best level of competition for Rodriguez coming into the UFC, but it was all those first-round finishes that he had accrued. We have a look on Topology for the total votes on this one, Matt. It's a surprise to us as it is to you. Now, Pete Rodriguez is a giant favorite, and I'm assuming that the fans are going to have him, so I'm going to say over-under 92.5% Rodriguez.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. It's over. 1,401 total votes. 95% Rodriguez, 87% by knockout. For the 5% that have Mike Jackson, 48% by decision, 33% by knockout. There is no disqualification banner on Topology, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But Matt, when I do look at this one, maybe Jackson can stick behind the jab, similar to what Jack Della was able to do, keep Pete Rodriguez at range, and then he's just kind of whiffing at air, trying to throw those power shots. But for me, I do like Rodriguez switching body to head in a matchup like this. I think he can back up Jackson, and I really do like that lead right hook that he loves to throw, especially with Jackson shoulder rolling, leaving his head exposed.
I still think Jackson can threaten with enough other areas of his game. Let's say Jackson and Rodriguez are even boxing. I just don't think Jackson's going to have those other areas where, okay, now it's going to start to put doubt into the mind of Rodriguez to where his boxing can open up even more. And that's why I do think Pete Rodriguez has a great chance to win this fight. I expect a lot of blitzes early, and And I do think that once he is able to get on the inside of the range of Mike Jackson, he should be able to get the win at that point.
We'll see if the man who represents Main Street Boxing and Muay Thai and formerly 4-Ounce Fight Club, Mike Jackson, can get his second consecutive UFC win, or will it be Pete Rodriguez out of Dominate MMA in Arizona getting his first UFC victory? Matt, both of us going with Dead Game Pete Rodriguez, changed the nickname. It is a big-time matchup in the welterweight division with no rankings whatsoever involved in this one. We have a big-time main event. Alexa Grasso taking on Viviane Araujo that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.